So I'm going to read through My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. This is in preparation for your Edexcel IGCSE English Literature exam for paper 1. So let's look at the title first. Firstly, it's a bit of an ambiguous title. What does he mean by My Last Duchess? Does that mean that he's had a string of wives and this is his most recent? Does it mean that his wife has died and that's why it's his last Duchess? So we're not 100% sure at this stage, if we hadn't read the poem before, what that might mean. However, there is a hint at the character of the Duke, who is the speaker of the poem, by using the possessive pronoun my, which could suggest that he's quite a possessive character. It's interesting also that Browning uses almost like a subheading of the Italian city Ferrara. And you could argue this alludes to Alfonso II, who was a duke in the 1500s. And his second wife died, and many people gossiped about whether he killed his wife. And so you could argue that Browning's poem, My Last Duchess, is an interpretation of what might have happened, regardless of what did actually happen, because it's not 100% clear. Even by the end of the poem, we're not 100% certain what happened between the Duke and the Duchess. But we can at least see that this is a criticism of the treatment of women by Browning, whether that be Browning focusing on the 1500s when Alfonso II was alive, or if this is during the 1800s when Browning was writing. But there's a clear sense of criticism here towards men and their treatment of women. So we'll start. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. So immediately we have the pronoun that, which suggests that the Duke objectifies his Duchess. So already there's something quite unsettling about the way he refers to his last wife. He doesn't say she's my last Duchess, he says that, and that suggests that he sees her like an object. Again, we have last, which we've already talked about, but to add to that, it does suggest that he sees his Duchess or Duchesses as sequential, almost like a collectible. So like he might collect art, he's collected wives in the past. And then again, there's ambiguity here where he says, as if she were alive. Now, does that mean that the painting is so lifelike, it looks as if she is alive in that painting? Or does this mean that his wife is now dead? I call that piece a wonder now. So again, we have a repetition of the pronoun that, and also again, he's referring to his wife with the noun piece. She's a piece of art now, rather than a human being. And we will see later that he didn't treat her well at all. So this all fits quite nicely with the idea that the Duke isn't a very nice person or a good husband. It's interesting that he considers this piece of art now a wonder. It indicates that maybe he didn't regard her so highly when she was alive. And then he goes on to talk about the artist who created this painting. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. So first of all, Fra is the term that you would call a monk in Italian. I believe it translates into brother, which is really important because later on we will see the Duke hinting at maybe there was something going on between them. And that makes his claim unbelievable because a monk is expected to be celibate. So it just makes his claim or his hint of something going on between the Duchess and the painter. It kind of discredits what he says. So that's important. Also, I've circled it. You'll notice I've circled it lower down as well. And later on in the poem, you'll see it circled again because it's repeated 3 times. Now, this artist is fictional. He's not real. He's created by Browning. But I think it's interesting that he repeats his name 3 times, almost as if he's name dropping, he's bragging that, you know, he had this famous artist create this painting for him. So there's something quite vulgar about the Duke as well. Will it please you sit and look at her? So again, he's objectifying his wife. She is just something to look at. I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So basically what he's saying is many people have looked at this picture and have wondered, oh, I wonder what was happening at that time for the painter to capture that look on the Duchess's face. I wonder what was happening while she was being painted to make her look that way. But I want to draw your attention to the parenthesis here, where he basically says, the only people who have been able to view this painting have been with me, because actually I have this painting hidden behind curtains. So that again reveals how controlling the Duke is. We will later see the Duke complain about the Duchess's eyes going everywhere. She looked at everything and everyone. And so he has this great need to control her, and now that she's dead and just in this painting, he is able to control where her eyes go. And it's interesting as well that he says, you know, people, they look as if they want to ask me if they dare. Durst means dare. So it highlights that many people fear the Duke. So again, we just have this kind of negativity related to his character. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus, sir. 'Twas not her husband's presence only called the spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. So he's basically saying it wasn't just me who caused her to blush. So spot of joy means to blush. But I think it's interesting that he refers to her blushing, which many would see as endearing and quite beautiful. He refers to it as a spot, which it presents it more like a blemish, like an imperfection, rather than something endearing or beautiful to see. So again, he's quite a negative character. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half flush that dies along her throat. So he's imagining what the artist Frau Pandolf may have said to cause her to blush. So he may have said, oh, your sleeve covers your wrist a bit too much. Do you want to show a bit more skin? Or how will I ever reproduce this little blush that you have that stops at your throat? And that might have embarrassed her. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. Now, I haven't highlighted this, but you might want to go and highlight this. Spot of joy again is repeated, and it just emphasises, I think, how annoyed he would get at seeing this. Now, what's interesting is what follows. So you'll see I've highlighted it all in blue. He's about to explain in this long list of all the things that annoyed him about his wife, the things that really bugged him. But quite ironically, this list of things are actually a list of great qualities. And if anything, they don't encourage the reader to dislike the Duchess and have sympathy for the Duke. Quite the opposite. It makes her seem even more endearing, and it exposes the Duke to be irrational and incredibly jealous. So let's have a look at some of the things that he didn't like. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad. So she's too easily made happy, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Remember, he now has her behind a curtain, so he gets to control where her looks are. Well, where she looks, sorry. So 'twas all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fall broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace. So these are the things that make her happy, and it bugs him that she enjoyed watching the sunset. She would blush if someone brought her cherries from the orchard. She enjoyed riding the white mule. So really, it just seems like she's very appreciative of the things around her. All and each would draw from her alike the approving speech or blush at least. So all these things, she would say approving things. She would say nice things about, or she might even blush. She thanked men. Good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. So here I've highlighted in purple, this is the heart of what really bugs him, that she treated people as equals. And she treated the men that brought her cherries from the orchard as equal to her husband, who gave her her surname, this 900 years old name. So what we learn here is that the Duke is incredibly proud and pretentious. And what actually bugs him about his wife is that she isn't as pretentious as he is, because she treats people well, and that annoys him. So again, this only serves to expose the Duke as incredibly irrational. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? So we've got the word stoop here, and it will be repeated 3 times, stooping and stoop later as well. So he's clearly concerned with lessening himself. So he's basically saying, if I complained about this, if I brought this up and spoke to her, this would be below me. So this helps support this idea that he's pretentious, and he's very much aware of the hierarchy in his social status. So he's not willing to even speak to the Duchess about this. Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one. Interesting that he says, even if I was a skilled speaker, and I'm not, which is ironic because we will talk about this later, but he's speaking in iambic pentameter and it's a dramatic monologue. So it proves quite the opposite. He's very skilled in speech. So what we learn here is that he's dishonest, and that not only should we not believe this, that he's not skilled in speech, but we shouldn't believe anything else that he hints at, i.e. his wife was having an affair. To make your will quite clear to such an one and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss, or there exceed the mark. So that is what he thinks of his wife. She absolutely disgusts him. And again, it serves to prove he is irrational, he's unjust, because she's actually a really nice woman. It makes us feel really sorry for her. But it paints him as the antithesis of the Duchess. They are the complete opposite. If anything, this is not a match made in heaven, because she is very kind and he is very judgmental and negative. And if she let herself be lessoned so if she allowed herself to learn from something, I would say. So again, just this idea that she should allow herself to be taught by him suggests that he sees her as a child, he sees her as beneath him. Not plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. So again, this idea that why would I try and explain myself? Why would I try and teach her how to behave? That's beneath me. I shouldn't have to. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? So again, this just encourages the reader to really feel sorry for the Duchess, who seems very pleasant. She smiles every time she sees him, but his issue is that she smiles exactly the same for everyone else. And this highlights that the Duke actually isn't just jealous, but you could argue is very insecure. He wants to be made to feel much more important than anyone else, and it really bugs him that she treats everyone equally. This grew. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. So what we notice here, this is I guess the most sinister part of this poem. We've got curt clauses, in other words, short clauses that don't really give much away, so it's quite ambiguous. This grew, I think he means there. She smiled even more. She continued doing the things that bug me. I gave commands. What commands did he give? What is he trying to say here? And that's juxtaposed with then all smiles stop together. So you might think, well, what commands did he give to stop her from smiling? Did he have her killed? And if you weren't sure, I think the next sentence heavily hints at that again. There she stands as if alive. So it's this reminder, I think, that she's no longer living, and he may very well have had something to do with that. And what's, I think, even more unnerving or quite chilling about this poem is he's basically just hinted at the fact that he killed his wife, and he changes his tune very quickly and moves on to something else. Will it please you rise? And I think that juxtaposition just adds to that sinister tone, that he can just switch very quickly onto a different subject. We'll meet the company below then, I repeat. The count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed. He's basically saying here, one, we learn that the person he's speaking to is the messenger of a count, and he is arranging to marry the count's daughter. And he's basically saying, I know that the count is very kind and generous with his money, and any dowry that I request, I'm sure will be met. A dowry is what men used to pay when they would pay the father of the daughter that they marry. So he's already onto his next wife. And I think that obviously confirms again the fact that his last Duchess is dead. Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. So he's saying, but actually, it's not the money. The most important thing, the most important object is the daughter. And it's a very interesting choice of word here to refer to her as his object. We have the possessive pronoun again, and obviously the noun object suggests that he just sees women as a possession. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which claws of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So what we have here, he's just been looking at a painting of his dead wife. And as they walk through maybe his hallway or wherever he is at home, it's juxtaposed with him pointing at another piece of art. So this highlights that he sees his wife as a piece of art. Well, not a piece of art, because that actually sounds positive, but another object, another collectible. And he doesn't think any higher of the painting of the wife as he does of this bronze of Neptune taming a seahorse. Quite interesting that Browning chose for this bronze sculpture to be of Neptune taming a seahorse. You could argue that this draws parallels with the Duke's own behaviour and the way he likes to tame women. And again, I've circled this in red, just like him name dropping the monk that was painting the image of his last Duchess. He's name dropping again. It's completely fictional. This person doesn't exist, but just the fact that he's dropping this name shows that he's bragging again. So let's have a look at structure and form. It's a dramatic monologue, so it shows that he's self-important. You could even argue that he's narcissistic. One thing that I didn't highlight because there's so much of it, and I thought I'd talk about it here, you'll notice that he uses the personal pronouns all the way through, my, I, me. Ends with, well, first of all, the title starts with my, and it ends with me. And all the way through, you'll just see repetition of I, me, my. So again, that just, I think, helps support this idea that he's really self-obsessed, self-important. It's also written in iambic pentameter in rhyme and couplets. So it's a tightly controlled poem. You could argue this reflects the tight control he wishes to have over his wives. What's quite interesting is the enjambment, however, helps create a conversational tone. So the rhyming couplets could have created an upbeat tone, and it would have kind of sounded a bit more melodic. But because there's enjambment, it means you don't end where the rhymes are, you quickly go on to the next line, and that makes it much more conversational. But I think the fact that it has a conversational tone, which is created through the enjambment, makes it more sinister, because he seems to be quite blasé about what he's saying, and actually what he's talking about potentially is the reason why he killed his wife. So that conversational tone helps add to that kind of chilling feel to this poem. So the themes are power, gender roles, jealousy or insecurity, relationships, and memory.